If I asked you to describe your financial situation, could you accurately tell me where you are, what you have? Would you even be willing to? No matter what your situation is, I promise you, I've heard worse. I'm Sara McCullough, certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, and I'm sharing some of the stories I've experienced over my career, taking those lessons and turning them into actionable steps for you to use. This is I've Heard Worse. At best, we get piecemeal information about money in general and our own money specifically. We're making piecemeal decisions in the moment as best we can, with partial information that may or may not be true at all and may or may not be true for us. You must think I'm stupid. This must be the worst story you've ever heard. I don't know why I can't figure this out. That's what clients say to me all the time. I hear that regularly. And I'm going to take a few moments in this episode to talk about why we named the podcast I've Heard Worse. Because clients say these things to me. This must be the worst situation you've ever seen. I'm so stupid. I made so many mistakes. I don't know why I can't figure this out. And I can see the weight of that feeling, and I can see what it costs them to be in a conversation with me. And what I tell them then, and what I am telling you now, is there is no worst, in my opinion. The worst thing for me is that you didn't show up, that you didn't show up for yourself, that you skipped over advice because you couldn't. Say where you are because you thought that you would be judged. Because I don't judge my clients. I am so glad you got over all of those feelings to get to a meeting with me. And the reality is, I am seeing you for a moment in time. I am seeing a sliver of your situation. And how you got where you are isn't my place to judge. And it's not my place to judge your priorities, your goals, your behaviors. My job is to give you full information, to answer your questions, to show you your risks and opportunities. Because when you have full information and you have context, then you will make confident decisions. So in my experience, there is no worst. There is the fact that you were motivated enough to have a conversation that you knew was going to inspire change. My goal is for more people to have a comfortable relationship with their money, to have the confidence to pursue their goals, to not be fearful, to have the capacity to act on what they think would make the space that they live in better for themselves, for others, and maybe others that they don't even know and will never know. Because you live with the outcome of your money decisions, not me. And so my goal is to permanently solve money stress for as many people as possible. And so now I'm going to talk about a few examples of situations that clients face and how planning conversations make that situation easier, more clear, and how planning conversations give clients more options to make better decisions. So I've mentioned the work that I do with clients who have recently lost their jobs, and they have to make decisions on their severance amounts. Again, their first instinct and their first desire is to save tax now. Their second question is really, I don't really know what to do. And on the saving tax question, I give them the information that they need about the actual timeline. I give them the information that they need about the impacts of using RSP room now versus later, how to best make a decision that is going to leave them financially stable and make the contribute or not decision a lasting one. Then we talk about what they need to do today and over the next several months. And then very often we have a conversation about their biggest asset, which doesn't show up on a net worth statement because that's not how they're designed. But when I am meeting with these severance clients, people who have recently lost their jobs, for the vast majority of them, their biggest asset is their earning potential. So one of the things they need to do from a financial planning perspective is protect their earning potential. So they need to protect their ability to interview well. And by having more information and more options about their finances, they can do that. So when they can go into an interview knowing how long their severance will last, knowing what their savings can do for them and for how long, and knowing that they are financially stable, they will interview better. If the outcome of that conversation is they're not financially stable and bigger choices need to be made more quickly, they also go into the interview knowing that. They know the situation. Knowing is better than not knowing. Do not pull energy away from your ability to interview well because you're stressed about your finances. The second example of the possibilities of financial planning that I want to talk about is more of a general sense that people come to me and they say, I didn't know what to do, and so I didn't do anything. And this comes up most often in we have assets, we have cash, but I'm not really sure what is possible because I do have a big list of goals and I don't know how far this money that I have will go. So I didn't do anything. And that is the missed opportunity section. That is the mistake of too little. And once they have a financial planning conversation, I'm more able to clarify for them, these are the goals that you gave me. If you move this like this to meet this goal, if you let this go, if you spend over here to meet this goal, then do you see that the remaining picture looks like this? And you're possibly still okay. And the other thing that often happens in these situations where clients say, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. They also have a piece of partial information. And they were thinking, I'm worried about this. I think this might affect me. So I'm just going to hang on and not do anything because I don't want this to happen. And often I say, I don't want you to worry about this. That's actually not a thing for you. That doesn't affect your situation in any negative way at all. Sometimes it's actually a positive, or sometimes it's just a non-issue for you. There was a time where I had a lot of clients say, I'm worried about interest rates going up. And I would say, that's interesting. Why are you worried about that? Because you don't have a mortgage. That doesn't affect you. So financial planning conversations can clarify, where are you now? What do you want to do? And how do all of those pieces fit together? So once you start putting those pieces together, what does your overall picture look like now? Because if you like it, then go do it. Don't hesitate to do things that are within your realm of possibility. Because when you do that, you're actually decreasing your own opportunities. The other conversations I have often are really around multiple goals. So how do we do multiple things on top of all of the other things and still know that everything is okay? And so this is the question that comes up a lot for young families who are at the beginning of raising kids, who are often at the beginning of a mortgage, maybe beginning to mid-career, and are trying to hold all of these threads at the same time. What about the month-to-month expenses? What about the kid expenses now? What about the kid expenses when they get older? What about when they start driving? How do we pay off the mortgage faster? How do we maximize our RSPs? All these things. Because part of us knows that they're all connected. And part of us knows if I move one thing, I think it's going to shift the other things. But we don't know how. And we don't really want to talk about that. And that's certainly not how we find information in a connected form. We find it in an isolated form. And so how do we do all of these things at once? And planning conversations will let you understand how you do all of the things. If you need to prioritize, because maybe all of the things don't fit in your situation, you will know and you will be able to reprioritize instead of having your situation reprioritize for you because you didn't see it coming, because you didn't plan ahead. And so we all have financial limits. And sometimes we have goals and dreams and wishes that just go beyond our own boundaries. That's not a bad thing. But what I think is important is that you have the opportunity to choose how you prioritize actively. And so when I have these conversations with clients, As I said, they often come up with young families earlier in career. They also come up when bigger changes happen, when kids get older, when careers are reassessed, coming close to retirement. Midway through retirement is a big point for people. I will put a link in the show notes to a book called Couples That Work, because interestingly, there are 3 distinct points in our relationships where we actually renegotiate our relationships. And that's often when I see people for financial planning, is when they're at a relationship and career point. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about why I care so deeply about this and why I actually know that this is solvable. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I landed doing the financial planning full time. And that really started when I changed firms as an investment advisor in 2007. At that time in my career, I was managing investments and also doing the financial planning for my clients. But with this firm, I had more independence over my day-to-day and how I spent my time. And for me, that meant that I did more planning because I could. And then 2008 happened. And in case you were very busy doing something else or you didn't have investments in 2008, in the fall of 2008, stock markets dropped by 50% in 12 weeks. That's 50 and 12 weeks. At that stage, the most common question in my meetings with clients were clients asking me, what if the stock market goes to 0? Because based on what they were seeing in the news and online, that seemed like a real possibility. Mayhem, to describe that period, is an understatement. And I had done planning for my clients before this happened. Not just investment recommendations, which I was also doing, but I was doing actual financial planning for my clients. And what happened in that period was none of my clients sold their investments to cash. And again, if this is not a familiar space to you, what you need to know is in that period, trillions of dollars of formally invested money in both stocks and bonds, trillions of dollars was sold and moved into cash because investors were scared. And investors suddenly didn't believe what their advisors were telling them. They didn't believe their investment advisors. They didn't believe their financial planners, and they sold. And none of my clients sold, not even the really scared ones. So don't get me wrong, my clients were nervous. It was hard. They were scared. One of my clients, this was his first investing experience at retirement. And when he would come into my office was quite small at the time, he would back his chair up as far as he could away from my desk. It was so hard for him to have these conversations about these investments. And he didn't sell. A lot of pieces of the conversation I had with that family really stand out for me. But today I'm going to tell you about a different conversation that really made it clear to me that the financial planning work was valuable to clients and that it had a real hard financial benefit, a financial gain attached to it because they didn't sell at the bottom. And this client was also new to investing. She was also newly single. So when we were meeting in this time period, I explained what had happened to her investments. I showed her the current values. We talked about her current situation. We talked about her current income and expenses. And I said, are you worried? And I said, because I'm worried that you're worried. You've had a lot of big life changes in the last couple of years. And this investing thing is new to you. And this is a really hard market. And she said to me, almost before I got it out of my mouth, she said, no, I'm not worried at all. She said, I believe that you've put together the best possible portfolio for me because you know all of my financials. And I also believe that if you didn't put together the best portfolio for me, you know that I'd have to move in with you because you know everything about my financials. And I also believe that you don't have room for all of your clients to move in with you. So I'm not worried. And I thought, well, that's true. That is what happened. But what stuck with me was that because she had all of the other information, not just the investment-focused information. Because we had talked about her entire situation, including the investments, and we had talked about what happens when markets are bad. What does a bad market mean? What would that look like for her? Because we had already talked through all of that, and she was confident that I understood her goals, her risk zones, and she was more clear on her own financials. She believed that where she was investment-wise was the right place for her to be. And because she didn't sell, that was true. And so that conversation really drove home for me that, yes, it's hard to quantify, and it's true that financial planning changes the dollar line outcome that you will experience. And so there are certainly other examples over my career of standout moments for me when I can really see that the financial planning conversations have changed people's priorities, have changed their behaviors, have changed their choices. And some of them are general, like when clients keep showing up, even when the conversations are hard, even when I know they don't want to have the conversation. I've had one client who cried every meeting because talking about money was so emotional for her, and she still showed up for every meeting. She would just excuse herself for 5 minutes, cry in the bathroom, and then come back. All of those clients who didn't sell in 2008, even though lots of other people did. And there was a cost to that. There's a cost to selling at the bottom and getting back in. There was another client who was really having a lot of stress with their money. And it wasn't that they didn't have it, because they did, and they knew that. They just also had a very busy family life. They had very demanding careers. And in the financial planning process, one of the things that I did actively recommended to them was changing the timing on 2 of their payments, because it looked to me like what was happening was that the payments were mistimed to their income. And just by changing that payment timing, the client went from running a $25,000 deficit a year, so they were using a line of credit, to not running out of money month to month. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. You add up $25,000 a year over not too many years, and you get to a big number. And they were frustrated. They were angry. And they were starting to add in some spending because they were frustrated and angry. We work hard. How come we're running out of money? Let's book a trip. That's what was happening. That was part of that $25,000 in debt that was adding up on their line of credit. And once we were able to change the timing and they had more clarity on their income and their expenses, that $25,000 shortfall actually disappeared. So that's a big deal. The numbers are a big deal. The relief for these clients is a big deal. They had demanding careers. They had 2 kids. They had each other. They had parents. So it's not just the numbers. It's all of the other things that worry and that frustration was pulling and causing stress and worry, and potentially going to spread into other areas. This is a huge problem. It's blocking so much that is possible right now. So this lack of clarity, this piecemeal advice, this partial information that may or may not be true. Let's talk for a few minutes about who benefits from the mistake of too little spending. Who benefits when you get overwhelmed and paralyzed because you couldn't make a decision on what you have? If you are scared to spend money, I think investment firms benefit from that. Banks benefit from that. There are lots of situations where CRA can certainly benefit from that. Is that who you want to benefit with your money? Let's think about who benefits if you can spend it in areas that are meaningful to you. Humans do. Humans benefit. You benefit. It's fun to spend money on things that you love and know you're still financially stable. Other humans benefit. Maybe those closest to you, maybe those a little farther from you, maybe those that you're never ever going to meet because maybe you gifted some of that money. So that's who benefits when we can solve the overwhelm and the fear of spending because we don't know what it looks like today and we don't know what it looks like tomorrow. Now let's talk about who benefits from overspending and incorrect information. This one, in all fairness, is a little bit harder to sort out. I guess lenders profit. I also think there's a storyline where the lenders could also profit from saying no more often. If lenders were clearer on affordability and had fewer loan losses, and people had more money to spend in other areas, how and when they wanted, would we have a more stable economy? Would we have a more stable society? That's a leap. I agree. And I'm not saying I know how we get there or what type of system that is, but I do think that better, full information, not encouraging overspending, but encouraging sustainable spending, I think it's possible and it's worth considering. If more of us behaved like that's what we wanted, and if more of us demanded that, what would our economy look like? What would our society look like? And is that something you want? Remember, this isn't just a minor inconvenience. The first episode in this series is about the average amount of hours that we spend worrying about our money. For Canadians right now, it is 15 hours a week. And that means there's stress, missed days of work, relationship stress. This doesn't just stay with your money. This is going to spill over into all areas of your life. And my goal is that you know that you can choose differently. This is what I believe. My experience in doing financial planning for people has shown me that this is true. When I see the changes that people are able to make. In the last 3 weeks, I've had 2 meetings with clients where we have run through a series of goals, and they are now more able to say, I want to do this. And I say, you can do that. Do you see your situation today? And when I add that in, down the road, you are still financially stable. And I say, is there anything else you would like to do? And we added in more goals and more goals. And at one point, both clients said, surely this can't all be possible. And I said, it is. Do you see? Do you see your situation? Here is your net worth. Here is your money coming in. Here is your money going out. When I add more money going out, you are still financially stable. It doesn't mean that all of your other goals are going to be unattainable. It doesn't mean that you are going to be financially unstable. Here are your boundaries where you would be financially unstable, but you're not there right now. The goals that you have given me are goals that are achievable for you. And that's really exciting. It's exciting to see people know that they can do what they want with the money that they have. And the spending that we talked about is going to benefit people other than the direct clients involved. Definitely they are getting some things that they want that are valuable to them, but so are other people. Again, some people that are close to them, some people that know them, some people that they don't know, and they never will know. There is some amazing gifting conversations happening with those clients. And when we think about how do we change where we are as a group, it is enough of us making tiny changes in the same direction that change things as a group. I want you to think about what you want in your situation and think about, what if I knew what fit into my situation? What if I knew? What would I do? What would be different? And once you've thought about that, I want you to think it is time to make a change. There are things that you can do right now. And one of my goals is to give you as many options as possible, to give you as many ways into this change as possible. You have listened this long to at least this episode, so you have done something. There's links in my show notes to email, to my calendar. We are going to put some links to the resources that we've used in other episodes in this episode as well. Because if you are the type of person who wants to build their knowledge and then have a conversation about your specific situation, then you can do that. So we're going to put information and links and resources from unbiased sources so that you can start figuring out, what does organizing my finances mean? what does financial stability mean for me? We've all heard about the benefits of taking that first step, and that's true. First steps usually lead to other steps, and then we get a domino effect. I also want you to think about the butterfly effect. And if this is unfamiliar to you, we're going to put a link in that to the show notes too. But basically the idea is a butterfly flapping its wings changes the air currents, which can change the weather maybe hundreds of thousands of miles away. It's a tiny thing. A butterfly flapped its wings. And so I'm going to give you a story from one of my clients that I think really highlights this effect, where maybe we don't know at the time. Maybe we are making decisions based on the best information that we have and based on our priorities, and we don't actually fully know the outcome. And that happens all the time. Where this can be really clear is for my separation clients. And for this client, I was doing her financial planning as she was working through separation negotiations. This was a hard conversation. The situation was financially complex and emotions were high. The client did have their goals. They were very clear on what they wanted. But then there was this question about, if I get what I want, what happens next? What about the next 10 years, 15 years, 30 years? Then what? And so through the negotiations, I was doing her financial planning. She had an accountant, and there was a tax specialist, and there was the family law lawyer. And these were hard conversations. More than once, I did a draft of her financial plan where if she got no further payments, what if she just walked away from the conversation because she couldn't negotiate anymore? So she knew what that looked like. And she chose to continue negotiating and getting more information and getting more advice. And they drafted an agreement. And the agreement covered a number of scenarios. If this happens, the payments change like this. If this happens, the payments change like this. And one of the changes happened. And because she put the time and energy and effort into negotiating that agreement, that did change her outcome, now 7 years out, by about $2 to $4 million than she would have come out with no advice. And before you think, I knew it, financial planning is for rich people, you have just as much access to the butterfly effect as that client did. This scales. This idea is proportional. Because are you actually telling me that you would be mad about a 10% increase in your situation, a 25% increase, a 50% increase? If your 50% is $2,000, I propose to you that you are 50% better off than you were before the advice. So don't count yourself out of these possibilities. Don't take yourself out of the butterfly effect, because part of the point is that nobody and nothing is immune, which means everybody has some level of access. And so what if we chose to put ourselves in a position where that could happen? Because you can do that. You can also choose to put yourself in a position where it won't happen. And so I want you to think about choosing where you are, choosing what is possible, and opening up the possibilities as much as possible for your situation. So I would love to hear from you about the questions you've had, the clarity that maybe you've had, that maybe something you heard in one of these episodes changed how you thought about your situation. And no matter how discouraged you are, if that is the space that you are in right now, I am going to point out that you listened all the way through. So you still believe that something can be different. You still believe that possibly everything can be different if you could just find a way to start. And there is a way to start. And I am going to give you as many ways as I can think of. And you can choose the one that matches where you are right now.